Do you have any questions about bobbins? Stay tuned and we'll help you answer those questions. Welcome to Handi Quilter Watch and Learn. Today we have...
I'm Kim Sandberg.
I'm Christina Whitney, and we're studio educators here at Handi Quilter. And we are going to talk about bobbins today.
All about bobbins.
Yes, and Kim is already decked out in her apron. You gonna sing the song?
No, I'm not gonna sing the song, but I really do like big bobbins, and I cannot lie about that. That actually takes us straight into talking about the bobbins for all of our machines. The number one thing to always remember with our bobbins is the size that we use, and they are big bobbins. It's the M class, right?
They are.
They hold a lot of thread.
They do. I mean, imagine using your domestic machine bobbin, like the L or the 15, how quickly you would run out of thread. So the M class, they're larger, they hold more thread, and they come in a variety of styles.
Yep.
So let's talk about those.
So these are the standard ones that come with your machine when you purchase it. They look like this. They're just the regular aluminum, anodized aluminum. They're silver. In the machine, it comes with,
I believe 5.
Yeah, I was going to say a handful of bobbins, which is perfect. One of them's already wound and in your machine, so that one's good to go. If you want to add to your collection, I always recommend the box of 30 purple bobbins. And everybody asks what makes them special.
They're pretty.
They're just pretty. Instead of having the silver anodized finish on them, it's a beautiful purple. And the really nice thing about this is it comes with the case to keep them in so that you keep all the dust and lint off of them.
Should we pull one of those out?
Yeah.
Just because they are so pretty.
They are
Let's show
so
them
pretty.
off.
I know. I have friends who have purchased these and made earrings out of them for their friends. So very fun.
Multi-use.
Yep, multi-use. Now, it's important to remember you only want to use one of these 2 bobbins or any previous bobbins you've purchased from Handi Quilter with our machines.
Yeah.
Regular, for winding the bobbins, a regular, just any old regular M-class bobbin that you might buy off of just somewhere off the internet, it's probably not going to work in the machine.
Yeah, a lot of times you'll see it's a great deal. You can get so many, and you'll buy them, you'll wind a bunch of bobbins, and then you can't figure out why you're having some tension issues. A lot of times it is because those bobbins aren't quite the right shape for the machines.
Exactly. So. Exactly. They're maybe just a little bit too tall or something like that. So winding, you can wind your own bobbins, and we'll talk in just a minute about how to wind your own bobbins. But first, let's talk about the other kind of bobbins you can use. You can use pre-mounts.
Your favorite.
They are my favorite.
Mine too.
I am a very self-professed lazy quilter. I love pre-wound bobbins. There's 3 different kinds of pre-wound bobbins. I don't know that I've seen any other kinds. So there's this one is one from Superior Threads, and there's other companies that do them this way too. This one has a little cardboard tube in the center, and there's cardboard on the outside of it. Now the important thing to remember here is that cardboard on the outside, honestly it's just there so that when they put them in the packaging, they stack well. Yeah. It's for shipping. So especially if you live in a humid area, this cardboard may swell a little, and so they won't fit very well. So feel free, you can actually, I'll just grab this right here and show you, you can just pop that off, and you can load them just like that with one side still left on, or you can even pop off that other side. They'll work just the same, just fine.
Yep.
Next we have bobbins like this. I believe this one's from Wonderful, is that right?
I think those are the Deco Bobs.
Deco Bobs, okay. And they do have a plastic, you know, little bobbin that they're on. And the one thing that is nice about these ones, you can actually wind on these ones again and use them, which is fine. I've seen people do that. They're not super sturdy, so they're not going to last a long time, but these ones that come pre-wound like this are just fine to use. Just make sure they're the M class. And then the last one we have here, these are the Magna Glides, and you'll notice they just have a little plastic center, and on one side it's just plastic. On the other side there's a little magnet. That's why they're called Magna Glides. Now, if you read in the instructions on these ones, they will recommend that you take the backlash spring out of your bobbin case. And let's grab one of those so we can show everybody. The answer to that is do not do that. So we've got 2 different styles of bobbins that have went out. This one has a silver spring there in the back, and you can see right there is a little screw that you would undo for it. This is an older style bobbin.
Bobbin case.
Bobbin case, yes, sorry. Thank you. And then this one has a spring that just pops in there. You never want to pop that spring out. It's actually called a backlash or a break spring, because what it does is it prevents the bobbin from spinning backwards when you stop quilting. It also makes sure that the bobbin stays pressed properly in place so that you'll have good tension through the entire bobbin when this is inserted into the bobbin hook. So even if you're using the Magna Glides, do not take out that backlash spring. If you do, you're gonna have problems.
Yeah. While we're talking about the backlash spring, we might want to mention that sometimes they do fall out.
Yes.
Like if you're cleaning a little aggressively, things like that, you can put it back in. Just make sure you've got it in the right direction. Sometimes over time, they're going to lose their spring. The spring has sprung.
Yes.
You can get replacement springs for the bobbin cases.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's and along those same lines, it's a really great idea to actually have a second bobbin case. There are many reasons to do this. Number one, if you are somebody who quilts with multiple colors of threads on projects, the nice thing is you can have a bobbin case tensioned and ready to go. So when you make that change, all you have to do is pop it in. The other thing is, I mean, we've both done it, right? You're quilting on Saturday night, trying to finish a quilt, and you drop and your backlash spring pops out, or maybe you drop your case, you can't find it, or heaven forbid you drop it on a really hard surface and it actually warps the side of the bobbin case a little bit and it won't fit anymore. So having that extra one on hand, it's just good security, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like if you have it, nothing's going to go wrong.
Exactly.
But if you don't have it, then everything's going to go wrong.
Yeah, and then you have to hope that you have a quilting friend that lives close, that you feel okay calling at 10:30 on a Saturday night about it.
Which wouldn't be either of us because we're asleep by
actually
then.
We would be in bed asleep, but hypothetically, it would work. It would work. So those are the different types of bobbins we can use. Okay, so let's talk about winding bobbins. If you're not going to use the pre-wound, you're not going to go the lazy route like I do, and you're going to actually wind your own bobbins. Although I have to admit, I did wind 6 bobbins for a project yesterday, so I'm quite proud of myself on that one. Yeah. So let's walk through how to properly use the bobbin winder. Now this is the bobbin winder that comes with all of the machines we sell except the Moxie, the 2 Moxie machines. Those have a different bobbin winder, and Christina recently did a really great video, the Moxie XL Getting Started, right? And there's a section in there that walks you through how to use that bobbin winder. So if you have that bobbin winder, that's a great video to check out. So simple, you plop some thread right here. If you happen to have one of these really big cones of thread that doesn't quite fit, you can just set it behind here and then run the thread up and over. If you find that this is moving around a little bit, you can use one of those nice tall thread stands like you use behind a domestic machine when you're using a cone. So don't be afraid of these. They're a great deal. There's a lot of, I'm trying to remember how much thread they put on here.
A lot.
A lot.
And like, this one's not even full anymore.
No, it's a crazy amount. Okay, so I've got my thread here. What I'm gonna do is bring it up over the thread mast. So it just goes right there through that loop. Then we need to come down and go through the little pigtail thread guide. Now, there's 2 different ways that we can go from here. We want to make sure that that pigtail is a little bit in front of, I'm going to turn this just a little bit, in front of the tension guide here, because we want to make a loop that goes back like this, so that as the thread is going through, it's looping around. If you have really slick thread, you're using like a tri-level polyester embroidery thread, Magnifico Glide are common ones. You can also, and we actually have this approved by the engineers, you can bring the thread straight down and then wrap around that tension guide. So it goes straight down and then wraps around. And that way it won't pop out of those tension guides.
So it's doing that full circle. I do that a lot of times when I'm winding bottom line, like a 60 weight thread, because it constantly is popping out of that tension disc. But doing it this way, it keeps it in place.
Exactly, exactly. So you want to do that. Now the next step is to get the thread onto our bobbin here. And our bobbins have this little slit right here, and it's here for a reason. What you want to do is actually put that thread, okay, so we're going to thread it through, we're going to pop it on there. Okay, Now, what you want to do is hold it straight out, but don't put too much tension on it, and then we'll do our start button, and it will start winding, and you let it wind. I let it stack 3 or 4 times back and forth, and then you just give this a little tug, and it will actually break off the end of that thread. That way, the thread is securely wrapping around there. You let it go ahead and run. It does have an auto stop, or you can hit the stop button if you decide you don't want to fill your bobbin up all the way, and you can adjust your speed too. I usually don't go above maybe a 5 or a 6 winding. What do you?
At home, I feel like my winder at home is a little bit slower.
Okay.
Like I can go all the way up to a 10.
Okay, great.
And I haven't had any issues. So a lot of people, like you said, won't even go above like a 2 or a 3.
Yeah.
So it just depends on what you're comfortable with. I don't usually go up to a 10, but yeah, I can crank mine up a little bit more.
Crank yours up, yeah. So just, whatever you're comfortable with so that you're getting a nice wind on it.
Yep.
Now,
I was just going to mention, I've had a lot of people call in that are having problems winding their bobbins because when they're holding the thread at the initial,
start, that little piece out here,
they're holding it too tight. And so as soon as they hit that start button, it cuts that thread.
Yep.
So let it have some slack there.
Exactly.
Like I usually just hold it really loose. And can I tell you, I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but I don't know how many years of winding bobbins I did before I learned that that's what that slit was for. I would sit there and wrap it around myself like 10 times.
and try to get it to hold.
And oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Using that slit, game changer.
It is. It makes it nice and neat, and you don't have any extra thread flopping around because it just breaks off right there. So there is a purpose for that little slit.
Yeah.
It's a good tip. So
Okay.
a couple of notes here. So there's actually a little laser that goes in between these 2 posts right here that senses when your bobbin is full enough. If you find that your bobbin is not filling up enough or filling up too much, you can adjust it right here. So let's talk for a second about filling up a bobbin too much. Now, some people might think that this is not a real thing, but it very much is. If you look here, you can actually see that this thread, it goes way beyond the edges of that bobbin. And if I tried to put this into a bobbin case, it's not going to work properly. So you don't want to overfill a bobbin. A bobbin should actually be slightly just inside the edges right there. You don't want it to go beyond the edges like this one is. I don't know if you guys can see that difference there.
While you're talking about that, a lot of times people say the same thing with pre-wound bobbins, that they come with just a little bit too much thread. If that's the case and you're starting with a new bobbin and you're having issues, just pull a couple yards off of that bobbin, and that should help remedy some of the issues.
Exactly. So one other thing that you might run into is if your bobbin winder here starts doing where it's always stacking more to one side than the other and it's not doing an even stack. Like this one is a pretty nice even stack across there. If you run into issues with that, let me tilt the bobbin winder here. There is a knob right here on the back, and this actually adjusts this tension guide right here in and out, and you can make slight adjustments by turning that little knob back here to help it stack properly. So two little tips there with that, just making sure that you get a good wind on your bobbin.
Okay, so you can make adjustments on how full it is, on where it stacks, and then also the tension.
Yes.
And the speed. And the speed, yes. Lots of variables.
Yes.
Do you play with the tension much when you're playing with your bobbin winder?
No, especially because I usually tend to, I've just gotten in the habit, no matter what type of thread I'm winding, I tend to do where I come down and wrap it all the way around. And so right there, it adds a little bit of extra tension on it. I don't know that I've ever actually adjusted the tension on mine. Have you?
I just keep mine where it's at, and I have not had any issues. And I've wound bobbins with a variety of threads.
Yeah.
And so it's worked out really well.
Exactly. So the question now, moving on to logically in my mind, is how do we know if a bobbin is properly wound? So this is a properly wound bobbin. A really easy way to know if a bobbin is properly wound is just to kind of squish your finger into it, or you can even use a little screwdriver and push it into it. And the way to know that you've got the proper tension on it is, for example, you could take, let's just snip this thread real quick. You can take a commercial wound spool or cone of thread and just do the same thing. Push your nail into it or push the screwdriver into it a little bit, and it should feel the same on your bobbin. So you can kind of do the test this, test that, and make sure they're the same.
Yep.
Now here's two things that you might run into every once in a while. First of all, sometimes, especially if that thread is popping out of the tension disc, you're going to end up with what we like to call, it's a very technical term, it's a poofy loose. If you guys watch here, look how far I can squish that screwdriver down into there. You can see that there's no tension on this. You do not want to try to sew with this. You don't want to try to quilt. What's going to happen is it's going to start pulling the thread, it's going to pull it really tight, and the thread is just going to snap.
Yeah, because it tightens up on itself to the point where it just poof.
Exactly.
That's why I call Lucy Poofy.
Yeah, Loosey Poofy, Poofy Loose. You pick the technical term you want to use, that's just fine. Now, if you have one that something like this happens, here's a little trick. So if we come back over here to the bobbin winder, so Christina's got her little Handi Quilter mug back here. We got these a couple years ago. What you can do is you can actually take that bobbin, pull the thread off the end, and you can drop the bobbin inside here and then go ahead and run it up over, and you can rewind that bobbin. It's perfectly fine to reuse the bobbin, just it'll need to be rewound if you want to use it. Yeah. You could also use the thread on this, say for hand binding or handwork or something like that, and then when you're done using that thread, the bobbin's ready to be rewound again. Yep. Now,
so you can reuse the thread by rewinding it on another bobbin.
Yep.
You can use the thread for another project.
Yep.
And you can reuse the bobbin.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Now let's move on to the next one. This is a bobbin that's actually overwound. And let me show you guys here. You'll notice, so normally the top edge of a bobbin is slightly concave. Is that correct?
I don't know my concave and convex.
It's kind of like this. It's slightly curved in, okay, whatever that is called. I know that we're going to get lots of comments. It's kind of like me with right and left. But this bobbin, it's been overwound, so the post in the center has been compromised. And you'll see when I put this bobbin side by side with it, you see that the two ends on this are actually going out like this. They have popped the other way there. I believe it is convex, I think. So this is a bobbin you don't want to use. Number one, and you can't reuse this bobbin. It's been compromised. It's no good. It needs to be thrown away. Once again, you could still use the thread off of it. You could absolutely rewind it. You could use the thread for a different project. That's just fine. But if you go to put this in a bobbin case, it's too tall, which means it's not going to pop into the machine properly. And so your bobbin case, you'll start stitching and your bobbin case will actually pop out, which makes you jump and scream, because bobbin cases are not supposed to come flying out of the machine when you start stitching.
Yeah. Okay, so the one you're holding, that one's wound way too tight.
Yes.
And so you were saying it was overwound?
Yes.
So I just want to clarify the difference between this one that has too much thread that's overwound versus this one that the tension was just so tight on it that it actually snapped that center post of it.
It has compromised the bobbin itself. So you want to make sure. This one, you don't want to ever reuse the bobbin. This one here, you could just pull, a few yards of thread off of it and you could still use it in your bobbin. This one though, this bobbin is gone.
Yep.
Keep it, you can be like us and keep it as an example. That's about all it's good for at this point.
Yep.
Okay, so we've got those all taken care of there. We've talked about the bobbin winder. Next, let's talk about how to tension your bobbin, so your bobbin case. So first of all, we always want to start anytime before you put a bobbin in your bobbin case. This even includes when you're changing your bobbin while you're quilting. You want to take a minute and give this a little clean. You can use a little bit of a little brush to clean out, because especially if you're using a little bit of a linty thread, you'll get some in there. You can just take your finger and run it along those edges. Just make sure that you are not popping out that backlash spring. And we want to be sure and clean under the tension spring right here. Now you can just use a piece of paper. In my quilting studio, I keep a stack of Post-its, because Post-its are great. You can use them for all kinds of things. You just take and slip the edge of that right underneath that spring. You guys can see how that is going. You know what, I'll actually flip it over so you can see it a little better. That is going all the way underneath the edge of that spring, and just wiggle it back and forth a little bit and make sure there isn't a little, you can actually get a little brick of lint that will build up in there that will really affect your tension. So make sure you always clean it first. And once you've got that done, same thing with this type of one, it's time to go ahead and pop your bobbin in. Now, we've got a few different bobbins here because we want to show you some different just tensioning and working with. Okay, Christina's got like a test of things for us to work with here. Okay, so what should I start with? Let's see. Should I do...
Why don't you start with the pre-wound?
Let's do the pre-wound. This is what I'm most used to quilting with. Okay, so I'm going to grab a pre-wound and we're going to load it in there. Now, the way that you know the proper way to load the thread in there so it'll be turning properly is you want it to either make a B for a bobbin or a number 9 because you want it to turn clockwise. And what we're going to do is just pop it in there, and then we're going to slide, and we're going to have that thread go right through the little notch right there. And then we're going to slide it underneath that tension spring. Now, sometimes people think that the thread needs to come up through that little hole right there. It doesn't. It's going to actually be underneath that spring so you can kind of wiggle it back and forth a little bit. And then it's time to test your tension, right, Christina?
Oh, yeah.
This is the fun part. Okay, so to test your tension in your bobbin, what you do is lay it flat in your hand. We grab that thread and we just pull on it. And perfect tension, okay, this is a little loose. Do you see how that's falling over? We want it to stand up straight and, you know, proud while we're pulling it out. So I am going to make an adjustment here. Now, there's 2 springs on the side of the bobbin case. There is the smaller one, sorry, not springs. There's 2 screws on the side of the bobbin case. This smaller one right here holds the spring in place. The larger one, which is a darker color, is the one that we make adjustments on. And it's just the good old kindergarten righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So, but you want to, it's a small screw, so you make small adjustments on it. So I'm going to just tighten it a little bit. So righty-tighty, I'm going to tighten it about 2 minutes, just 2 little ticks of the clock, and then I am going to go ahead and do that. And right there, that is perfect tension.
So the goal here is for the bobbin case to stand upright in your hand, but not leave your hand.
And it almost wants to leave my hand, so it just pulls. You can see how nice and smoothly it's pulling. That is good tension. And once the tension is set in your bobbin case, you pop it in and you roll from there. But let's go through a couple of other examples of threads so you can see the difference with this. So just so you know, so this is a pre-wound. It's a 60 weight thread from Superior Threads. It's bottom line. So this is quite a fine thread. So you want to throw me a thicker thread. Okay, Christina, you just handed me a 40 weight cotton thread. I'm pretty darn sure. This is a nice thick thread there. You guys can see that. I bet that's a lot easier to see than that last thread I was working with. This is 100% cotton thread. It's a tough thread. Tough threads need a lot of tension, don't they?
They do.
Okay, so let's go ahead and pop this one in here, and then let's see what happens here. Do you see how it's kind of loosey-gooseying around in my hand? It does not want to just stand up. I definitely need to tighten that just a little bit.
While you're tightening that, I just want to mention, a lot of people when they're doing the hand test, they forget that you're supposed to hold your hand like you're feeding a horse, and they cup it. And so that's holding the bobbin case in place. So make sure your hand is nice and flat.
And here's another tip. Always do this over a table or over the top of your quilt. That way, if you happen to drop this, it doesn't fall far places. Just a little tip from me, Butterfingers. Okay, we should have this. Oh yeah, look at that. That is almost wanting to lift out of my hand, but I've got a nice smooth turn. So I definitely had to add some more tension to get that one to work properly.
Why don't we just add a little bit more tension so it's too tight so people can see what it looks like if it's too tight, and then to loosen it.
So I'm going to turn it about maybe 3 minutes and watch what happens. It's like I have a pocket watch. If I kind of shake it a little bit, it'll come down, and it'll even do this where it will pop out because the tension is just so tight, it doesn't want to move. When that happens, you just want to back off that tension a little bit. So once again, I'll just adjust that screw a little bit back, and then I can go ahead and once again, I've got my good tension there. And like Christina said, think of your hand as a table or like you're feeding a horse. It needs to be flat when you are adjusting that tension so that it can stand, you can see it standing up. You're not giving it extra support. All right, let's do another thread. You got something else fun for me?
I'll let you eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Okay, let's put that one back. Okay, let's do this one right here. Okay, so this is a trilobal polyester. It's a, I'm guessing it's probably like a Magnifico or Glide. It's a 40 weight. So not quite as tough as King Tut. So let's see where the tension falls there compared to the King Tut. Okay, that's actually, I can feel that it's a little loose. It probably looks pretty good to all of you, but it is just a little bit loose. So I'm gonna tighten it just a hair, and then I've got my good tension. Now, if I had put it in there and it was super loose, let me show you what would happen. If it's really, really loose, this is what happens. It won't even stand up. You guys can see I'm just pulling that thread out. It's turning, but it's not even trying to stand up. That's too loose. You have to have that tension on there so that it will properly stand up in your hand, just like that.
Perfect.
Should we go for that? I see you've got one specialty thread there for me.
Oh, I've got a couple fun ones here. I'll take that one for you.
So let's take a look at this one. I know that this one, it's actually a thread that's going to be almost impossible for you guys to see because this is monopoly. It's a clear thread. I don't know if you can even see that going across my hand. This can be a little controversial using in the bobbin, but if you're using, it's actually a polyester thread, it's going to act exactly the same as like a bottom line or something like that. It's made out of the same stuff. It just doesn't have any color in it. So let's tension this one. It is a fine thread though. It's like equivalent to 100 weight, maybe?
Yeah, and that one's a little trickier to wind the bobbin.
Yeah.
Because it stretches a little bit, so sometimes it winds a little too tight.
Yes, so you want to be careful with too much tension on that one. Okay, this one is actually, it's tensioning pretty well, right where I was with the previous, because I went from the Magnifico to this one.
Oh, should have made you go to a harder one.
I know. So, okay, I'd be okay with that one there. We'll get rid of that thread that
and that's why you do it over the table.
And that's why you do it over the table. Me and my butterfingers. Okay, we've got one other one here. Now this is some super specialty thread. This is for doing like bobbin work. Christina, what is this thread? It almost looks like embroidery floss.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I want to say an 8 weight maybe. Yeah.
Too thick to run through the needle, right?
Correct.
There aren't any needles out there that are enough. I'm gonna clip this extra little piece of thread. Do you guys see there's a little thread there on the top? I am definitely gonna clip that off. I don't want that wandering around while I'm trying to do any stitching. So we'll go ahead and put this one in there.
And sometimes these really, really heavy threads that you use in the bobbin, sometimes you don't even want to put them through the bobbin winder. You want to just wind them by hand, depending on how thick it is.
And what you would do on this one, this is where you would actually be stitching more than likely on the wrong side of the quilt with up, and then this would be the right side down, so you'd be having this fancy thread showing. So it's called bobbin work. It's basically, I don't know, like mirror sewing, mirror quilting, mirror reverse.
Yeah. We did a video a while ago where we did a little bit of bobbin work. It was for labels.
Oh, that's right.
And we used some stuff similar to this, but we quilted the label on the back of the quilt. And then we put the quilt top and stitched the rest of it. So
exactly. So if you want to use a fun sparkly thread like this on your label, you could totally check out that video that Christina and I did. I think it's called making labels for quilts. Probably something really great and original like that. Okay, so right now this is super tight. You guys can see that. It's like having that pocket watch. I'm gonna give this one a really big loosen because this is a thread. Okay, there we go. I think actually it's almost a little bit too loose. I loosened that like a half a turn. That was a little bit too much. So I can go ahead and get this one here. Oh, it's catching again.
Oh, I was hoping this would happen. Sometimes when you're tensioning thread, it gets to the point where it feels good, but then it catches.
Yeah.
And you want to like kind of jerk it to make it go up and down. If that's happening, you need to loosen it a little bit.
Well, and just a note on this thread. So this thread actually, because it's got, you can see that it's got kind of a metallic wrapped around it. It actually has maybe not quite as consistent of a thickness. So this is one that where I have it right now, I would probably just start stitching with it and test it. And I might need to pull this out and tension it again. That would definitely be the exception to the rule, where I might actually do a little bit more tensioning to this after I start stitching. So just remember, if you're doing bobbin work, you definitely want to plan on doing some practice stitching before you get started to make sure you're happy with that tension. Okay, I think we're ready to, let's just go ahead and put, what should I put in there to actually stitch with? We want to do some, okay, we're gonna go back to the tried and true, good old pre-wound. I'm gonna go ahead and pop that one in here. Now this is gonna be super loose, look at that, because I had that adjusted for that really heavy thread. I'm going to go ahead and give that a good, almost a half a turn. Oh, still too loose. Sometimes it takes a couple minutes to get the tension where you need it to be, doesn't it?
And this is another reason why having 2 bobbin cases is wonderful. So if you're using 60 weight a lot, you can have one bobbin case that's set at a starting point for the tension for that one, and then say you're doing a heavier thread, you can have another bobbin case. But again, every single time you put a new bobbin in, you're going to want to retension it. Even if it's the same batch, everything. Just every time you change your bobbin, retension.
Retension. Always check your tension. You're not necessarily going to have to make an adjustment, but you always, always, always check your tension before you put it in. Just a note too, we didn't really show this, but don't be afraid to use bobbins that are only partially full too. I know that some people are a little afraid of that, but you can absolutely tension a bobbin that is not completely full. Okay, so moving on now to, let's talk about ways that we can actually store our bobbins. So we showed you earlier the purple bobbins that came in the case. There's also cases just like this one. This is just our bobbin box. Once again, it's a great way to store your bobbins because it keeps them so they don't get dirty. And then we have the bobbin tree. This, I think this is actually one of my favorites. What do you think, Christina?
It's kind of fun.
It's kind of fun. I know we're not supposed to have favorites, but I use this a lot because I can put bobbins from my domestic machine in here too. And this is the really cool thing. I can actually take and pop it apart. So if I have I actually wound 5 bobbins for a quilt. I can have them all in one place. I can keep this close to my machine while I'm quilting. All of my bobbins are there and ready to go. So,
or when you're going on a retreat and you don't want to take the whole bobbin tree, but you need some bobbins, just pop off the one that you need and that can go with you.
Exactly. It's just super convenient. And it keeps the bobbins from unwinding. Now this doesn't keep them dust free, so you know, if you want to keep it nice and clean, probably just pop it in a drawer. You could do something like that, but it is super convenient, especially if you do happen to be switching colors or you're using a lot of bobbins on a quilt because it's denser quilting. The next step is to put the bobbin in the bobbin hook, but first we always want to clean inside there. You can see I've got a little buildup of lint there. If you do have a machine that's got the black barrier back here, the black dam, feel free to use canned air. So we'll just do a couple little bursts of air.
Make sure your mouth is shut when you do that.
Absolutely. Whew, got a nice little mouthful of that. And you can also use the brush. If you do have a machine that does not have the dam back here, so for example, the Avante, the Simply, the Fusion, the HQ16, don't use the canned air. Be sure and use the brush that came with it. Now the next step is to always, anytime you change your bobbin, is we need to do a little bit of oil right on the bobbin race right here. So I'm just going to do one little drop right there. Just a little drop there. And if you feel like you got a little bit too much there, just use a little batting scrap and you can dab it off. If you want to, you can cycle your machine to run it, but you don't have to do that. If you want to, you can. If you do, I would recommend doing it with your needle not threaded because otherwise it will wrap around the center spool. Okay, now we're going to take our bobbin case. I'm not going to have the little latch pulled out. I'm going to make sure that it's in, and we're just going to make sure that this little open slot, oh, there's a little piece of lint right there. We're going to make sure the little open slot is to the top. We'll go ahead and just put it right there. And there's a little slot right there where that little catch goes. It goes in and we get a nice little click. And then the bobbin's in there and we're ready to start stitching.
Perfect. I do want to mention to our viewers that we are on the Amara ST right now. It's one of our stationary machines. So the table is going to look a little bit different than on your frame-mounted machine, but it's going to work the exact same.
Exactly. Well, you're ready to start quilting now.
That was a great explanation on bobbins.
Thanks.
So for our viewers, hopefully that answered some of your questions. And if you stay tuned, in another month or so, we'll have another video talking about the actual tensioning for the top tension. So this is kind of part 1, and then we'll do another one next month. So thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe, and make sure you have a lot of fun quilting this week.